guess we can start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Um,
congratulations on your beautiful work on the show. I really could not get enough of it. I feel like I don't know, have been a fan of your work for a very, very long time. You're one of like the most talented editors I know. And I think this
oh,
show, yeah, and I think that this show really highlights that. And in particular, your ability to blend genres and travel seamlessly from genre just to genre to genre and tones on this film. I feel like this, or sorry, on this show. I feel like this show traveled through so many different tones without even batting an eye. Like one moment you're in a comedy, and one moment you're in a drama, and one moment you're dealing with trauma. And I just felt
yeah.
as a viewer, I was carried through all of it. So I'd love to hear about your experience finding the tone of the show and bringing it to life so flawlessly and seamlessly.
Yeah. I mean, it was our biggest sort of battle in terms that's something that we were constantly thinking about. And the whole editing team, it was me and Laura Zempel and Isaac Hagee. Laura, I did episodes 1 and 4. Laura did 2 and 5, and actually her assistant editor, Jen Bryson, got a co-edit on episode 5. And Isaac did episode 3. We were constantly talking about the tone of the show and trying to figure out the balance. And it was tricky. It definitely was. There were times because it takes huge swings. There's some really funny stuff, and then there's also some really dark, dramatic stuff, all within the same episode, sometimes within seconds of each other, like in episode 3, where it goes from, this ethereal, almost dreamlike sequence between Devin and Michaela in the bathroom when Michaela's in the bathtub, and then we like cut straight to them in the car with the Fates, Devin in the car with the Fates who are singing WAP, right? That's like the biggest tonal swing in the whole series, I think. Um, but it was intentional. And so, we just used our instincts, honestly. Like there wasn't anything specifically that we did across the board. It was always like, can we get away with this, or is it oftentimes it was pulling back on the humor, I think, a little
Mhm.
bit, um, that we had to not use the broadest version of a joke or broadest performance, to try and, I mean, there are definitely some pretty sort of slapsticky jokes in the show, but like just try and ground the humor and but certainly never lose it, you know. There we got notes at times where it's like, let's try cutting some of these jokes. And we all really held firm that no, we weren't going to do that. And that the show was sort of intentionally a little bit of a tonal balancing act. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
That does, and it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense because I'm really happy. Like it strikes me that to hear you use the word ethereal because I was thinking that word came to mind so much when I was watching it. I should say that when the show first dropped, I binged through them all in
Yeah.
like a day. I just couldn't stop. I was just go 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 go.
Yeah.
I was just hooked in, and then I had the pleasure of rewatching in preparation for this. And I think I really got to appreciate all of the subtleties that were there all throughout, that sets up some of the relationships that develop over the course of the series.
Hmm.
Um, but in the humor, I feel like the humor was so grounded in many ways. Like there were some moments, like you're saying, of the physical and the more
Hmm.
broad, but I feel like the humor for me like really worked. There's a moment um even just Devin's delivery of some lines. There's a moment in
Yeah.
episode 1, I believe, when Simone's, boyfriend is saying, "Oh, maybe she mentioned me," and Devin's like,
Oh, no.
"No," is
No.
like
Yeah.
pitch perfect. I was
Yeah.
like, I've never heard a line reading that was so amazing, but also the
No.
timing
Yeah.
of it and the reality of it and how you're just suddenly it just feels real. You feel like the kick in the stomach of that moment as though you're standing there with them. So you have these moments where it feels like you're it's organic and you're there, and then you go inside and then there's this like cultish sort of ethereal, like what is going on, and almost like magical realism in a way. And it's
Yeah.
really fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Megan Fahey, I'm after cutting her, I'm like her biggest fan ever now. She's so good, and she gave us choices. She gave us a lot of range, um, with her humor. But that specific moment that you mentioned, like there was one take, and I was like, that's the one. Like it was very clear. Just she's so dismissive in that moment. Oh, I see Isaac
Yeah.
has joined. Just one of our editors is here.
Yay!
Hi, Isaac. Um, and yeah, no, I mean, she was just brilliant. She actually made it. I mean, all our actors were brilliant. We were really lucky, but we had range and variety so that when we were, trying to like dial in a specific tonal moment, especially, Devon with Megan, she gave us so many choices that if we wanted it to be more vulnerable, we could do that. Or if we wanted it to be kind of, uh, you know, mean and cold, she would do the same line of dialogue in a different take that way. So she really made it, all of our actors, possible for us to dial things in. But yeah, she's always very funny too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like that really shines through, and I feel like the sculpting behind it, especially again on the rewatching. Because I think one thing that the show does really beautifully in every episode is your sympathies and who you're rooting for or who you think you understand are constantly shifting and evolving. I form first impressions about each one of the characters in episode one, and most of them, all three of them, have changed pretty radically by episode five. But it's a slow journey to that, and there's a lot of like bumps in the road. And I'd love to hear what it was like,
Yeah, yeah,
with
and
especially with your three leads.
all
Yeah.
all of that was on purpose. Molly Smith Metzler, our showrunner and creator, she first they conceived of she and her husband. He's a writer on the show as well, and an EP. Um, this was based on a play that she wrote, and then they were trying to figure out how to make it a series. And their daughter is really into Greek mythology, and so they were talking about sirens someday at some point, and realized that this idea of like the siren story only ever being from the man's point of view, and like that we just assume they're the villains who like they're the excuse. They were just a creation, an excuse for why men would crash their ships on the rocks. And um so you think they're the villain, but the idea was, what if we're looking at this from the siren's point of view? So that sort of translated to the show in terms of like intentionally sort of making you think you know who the villain is at the beginning of the series, but over the course of the 5 episodes, that completely changes. And the question becomes like, is anyone actually a villain? And of course, at the very end of the show, we very clearly, I think, are trying to say that, no one is a monster. Everybody's sort of a product of their circumstance, and the choices they make come from, I mean, it deals with so much with trauma and everything. But yeah, we were constantly trying to turn the idea of like, you think you know who the villain is or who these characters are, and that's gonna change and surprise you. And if nothing else, you'll be surprised by the show. I know the ending has been, a lot of people have been really confused by it or surprised by it, or there are people who didn't like it at all. Um, but we knew it was a big swing, and that, because you think you understand what the show is, and it's not that, that was all very intentional. So,
And yeah, and executed really well and beautifully. I'm a fan of the ending. I was shocked by it,
yeah,
and I said, "What?"
yeah,
But it all made sense.
that's good.
And it
That's
made
good. We
it.
were
I
hoping it would
no,
make sense.
it was so thoughtfully set up, and I think you really, you left the trail of breadcrumbs all throughout that, and you did it so artfully and subtly, in every episode, the whole team. And it really was on second viewing that I said, "Oh, wow, it's the intricacy is really deep in there in a really beautiful way." Will you tell me a little bit about how you came to join the team and be on the project?
Yeah, it was. was a script that came to me through my agency, and I loved it right away. I read it the first time. I was like, yes, I definitely want to meet on this. I knew Molly's work. She did that show for Netflix called Maid, M-A-I-D,
Loved it.
which
It's so good.
yeah, I had loved that show. And I knew that before I interviewed that Nicole Cassell was going to be the director of episodes 1 and 2, and she was a producing director, so she was involved for the whole series. And I was familiar with her work as well. And obviously, between the two of them, none of the cast was attached yet
Mm.
when I read the script. So I was reading it blind with no specific actor in mind.
Yeah.
Um, and so I met with both of them at different times, actually. I had two different interviews with them, and we just really clicked, and I think they liked my take on it. They were both familiar with a bunch of the work I've done, especially Transparent, and we're both big fans of that show, so that I
Hmm.
know that helped me a lot. But we got along great in the interview, and like you've interviewed a million times with directors and producers or writers, editing interviews are hard. Like, what do you even talk about? Like,
Yeah.
so how do you, because every cut, everything is different depending on footage, on the script, on a million things. You can't really talk about it specifically. Um, but so for me, I often find that interviews are about whether you get along,
Hmm.
with them. And we definitely clicked right away. And I made it, I did not play it cool at all. I was like, I want this. It was very clear that I was very excited about the project. And because I'm always looking for projects that are about women and made by women. Like that's my wheelhouse and what I love to work on. And
Good
and I also
wheelhouse.
love this script. Yeah, yeah. I loved this script, and I read a lot of scripts that I don't love, so it's rare
Hmm.
that something really good comes to you. So yeah, so I was lucky, and I got hired,
And
and
it's amazing.
and I hadn't worked with any of this team before, with Laura, with Isaac. I knew them socially, of course. There's through the editing community, and also my assistant editor, Lily Wild, who's amazing. I knew socially as well, but had never worked with. But so yeah, it was just like dumb luck, and it was great.
That sounds wonderful. And so the
Yeah,
collaboration between amongst the editing team, so between the
yeah.
three editors and the three assistants, what was that like? Were you passing episodes back and forth? Were you talking about were any scenes moved from one episode to the other? Were you sitting down in the room together and discussing how you were
Yeah.
going to set up arcs between characters? What was that collaboration like?
Um, well, right off the bat, it was really great because Laura and I were cutting episodes 1 and 2, and they were
Hmm.
being shot at the same time. They were cross-boarded. Um, and Nikki, who was directing them, wanted us to send scenes to her every Friday just so she could see how things were coming together. And so we decided to sit down every Thursday morning, Laura and I, and Jen, her assistant, and Lily, my assistant, the four of us. This was before Isaac joined the team because
Hmm.
he came on for episode 3. um, we would sit down every Thursday and watch all the scenes that we'd cut that we'd gotten that week together, the four of us, and just like then we would proceed to spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours just talking about everything. Um, and a lot of it was like, I mean, the footage was amazing, the cuts were good. Like it wasn't the question wasn't so much like, oh, this scene is never going to work, or how do I put these two angles together? We were dealing with really high quality footage. It was just a lot of conversations about the tone, the characters, and what drives them and what motivates them, and how we could help infuse all of that storytelling into our edits. And it was really great because we would really hash it out. Be like, nah, I wasn't crazy about this or that or whatever. Do you that was too funny, or this wasn't funny, or I wanted to feel that more, whatever. And it was such an open space for all four of us to discuss a lot.
That is such
um
the dream
oh, it was
scenario.
really, really
That's
great, and we were working in person in an office, and so we were really able to collaborate like that. And then when Isaac joined, he's talked about it before that he had those two episodes for him to watch. They were like editor's cuts, I think, that he watched because they started shooting 3 right after they finished shooting 1 and 2. So he hadn't gone through the process of director's cut and so forth, but he had something to look at. Um, And I think that was really helpful for him. And then, of course, we all started talking, and we all watched each other's episodes as much as we could, Um, and it was just a really great and his assistant's name is Cameron Ross. He was also wonderful. Like,
Mhm.
it just, we all just really worked together. And there's this is one of the things I love about working in TV, is that you get to collaborate so closely with other editors, but you all still have ownership of your own episodes, which is great too, because we all like to have our own thing as well. So yeah, it was great. And you asked if we moved anything from one episode to another. Very little.
Yeah,
There was one scene, there was a dream sequence that was originally in episode, uh, I think it was in episode 3, that ended up in episode 5, that
I
now
see.
starts episode 5. Um, but I think that was the only scene that moved from one episode to another.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Because it's so linear in terms of the course of the weekend, it was, just flashbacks and things that potentially could have moved too. So,
The flashbacks were so powerful. I- the flashback in particular, there was one at the, believe it was at the top of episode 4,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you're flashing back to Simone's interview
huh,
with Kiki, her first initial time meeting her,
yeah,
and the way that was kind of cut right in between. You're breaking up the big proposal scene, which
hmm,
crosses 2 episodes, right? So I'm really enjoying hearing about this collaboration that you're describing, because you feel that in the consistency among all of the episodes, and in the way that they all kind of tell the same story, they hit the same tones, they hit the same notes, that in a way that's really complementary. And so I can feel how much you guys were working together and talking about it, and thinking of the macro all through it.
yeah,
But that flashback in particular, and I think it ends, the audio switches where we're in
uh-huh,
the flashback, and then suddenly the question
yeah.
being posed by Kiki is actually being posed in the room in the current day by Simone's boyfriend. And uh I was curious if that scripted. Was that a decision that you guys made in post,
The
like bleeding the audio into each
Bleeding
other,
the
or
audio was a thing that, yeah, it was Q, the director, Q and Tran is her name, and she goes by Q.
yeah,
It was her idea. She's like, let's try to put Ethan's voice in Michaela's mouth. I was like, okay.
it
I
was
had
so
cut it more, I had cut it so that the line was repeated. So, because I think as it was scripted,
uh,
Michaela says that, so what do you think? And then we cut back into the room, and Ethan says, so what do you think? But instead, Q came up with this idea of, let's put Ethan's audio in Michaela's mouth. And when we tried it, it lined up so perfectly that it was like, so we did try a bunch of different versions of but then we landed that was Q's first, that was in her director's cut, and we messed around with it a few times, but then we were like, you know what? Put it back. We love this weird thing.
it's
um yeah, and
it's
it just pulls
weird.
you back into the
It's
present. That was the thinking at
weird.
least.
Yeah, it's weird and it's fabulous, but it's also on point. I mean, it
Yeah.
underlines the parallel between, where the show goes, and this
Hmm.
really compelling conversation, I think, that also happens in episode 4, where Kiki's character, uh, so she describes her marriage as basically a state of employment. And
Hmm.
here's Simone getting another proposal, another potential
Right.
job
Yeah.
offer, and the lines getting blurred and the audio bleeding into each other. It was such a wonderful way, I think, to it's another one of those intricate breadcrumbs, I think, that when you're watching, you're just like, oh, that's cool. And then on the rewatch, I'm like, oh, there's the thesis of the show, or one of the theses of the show. It's
Yeah.
really, really effective and really, really beautiful.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. Yeah, yeah, it's great. I love that moment. It's so weird.
yeah, it's wonderful. There's also in the pilot, I think, or in the first episode,
Mhm.
um, the introductions, I think, to the sisters, and
Yeah.
seeing Devin travel to Simone, and th- really building these characters out, our first impressions of these characters,
Mhm.
which, evolved over the course of the show.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about the process. I know you said that, you worked on how you had quite a bit of performances from Megan, where you could really
Yeah.
modulate what you got for Devin's character, and I'm sure for all of the characters.
Yeah.
But I think you did a really great job juxtaposing the sisters and then also Kiki in that. And I'd love to hear what that was like meeting the characters in that first episode
Yeah,
and how that
I
came to
mean,
be.
like the act one in any movie or the first act of any episode, especially a pilot, when you're first meeting your characters. Cutting a pilot's a lot like cutting a movie, actually, in that act one is all set up. I mean,
Hmm.
a pilot is all set up, but you hope that the story moves along in the pilot. But act one of is where you constantly go back and revisit and say how far can we pull back? No, that's too far. Put some things back. Um, but yeah, we did a bunch of restructuring there too to help really sell the one, two, three of the women. Like initially on the page, the script started with Devon and Buffalo sitting on the curb and, or, coming out of the police
Hmm.
station. And then very early on in Nikki's director's cut, she was like, let's try it with Michaela at the beginning on the cliff. I
Mm.
think it just sets us up in this world of the island, right? So instead of in Buffalo, where it isn't where our show is ultimately going to take place. So let's see that place, the beauty of it, the strangeness of it, the birds of it all, you know. So when we made that switch, we never went back. We were like, great,
Hmm.
that's always going to start the episode. Um, but and then getting Devon to the island, it was really just about like, let's get her as there as quickly as we can while still setting up Bruce, the dad, and the sort of gritty, not so pleasant world of Buffalo, where she lives, and that something's wrong, obviously. And then we did this whole reimagining of the section of Devon getting off the boat, walking to the house, and Simone getting ready for the day, where she, is getting dressed and the perfume and everything.
The
They
perfume, by the way, which cuts in the episode against the sprinkler shower, which I think is one of the best cuts ever. You get the perfume spritz from Simone, and then you get Devin rolling around in the sprinkler. It just makes me laugh out loud. So
I had never even thought of that connection.
it's brilliant. It's so
That's
good.
hilarious. I've
Yeah.
never thought of that. Yeah, because originally they were two separate scenes. There was Devin
Oh.
walking, and there was Simone getting ready and checking in with the staff.
Hmm.
And then they were two separate things. And I think, don't quote me on this, although I know I'm on Instagram, but I think the scene of Kiki at the aviary when she first meets Winston was between the two, I think. I can't remember for sure. I should check the original script. But anyhow, we decided at some point, and I can't remember whose idea it was, to cross cut between Devin and Simone. They're, Devin walking, Simone getting ready, and really trying to amp up this idea of these two very different but very connected sisters who are clearly on a collision course,
Hmm.
and this is all this like it's all building up to their first fight there in front of the house when Simone pulls up in her golf cart there. It's like, fuck you, you
Yeah,
fucking bitch is the first line.
which
But
is so
I
good.
love I love that scene so much. That argument between them is one of my favorite things in the whole show.
It's
Um, but
amazing.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so there was a lot of work done there at the beginning, and then just to try to, and also about where we were going to put the main title card. We were like, let's
Hmm.
have three scenes with set up each of the
Hmm.
sisters, then the title card, and then yeah, we did some rearranging in Act One, like you always do with a movie or a pilot, and but I think I'm really proud of where we landed on it, honestly, in terms of really establishing that these two sisters are very connected and headed towards on a collision course, but Kiki or Michaela is circling around them and influencing them. And I think we sort
Hmm.
of try to set up that dynamic right off the bat.
Definitely. And again, later in the episode too, I think they're both having, some intimate scenes and, there's basically sex scenes that the intercutting between the two sisters
Hmm.
and Michaela's in
Yeah.
there wandering around this big house, like feel it like
Yeah.
the bird in the cage, right? Lonely.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. And I think doing that cross-cutting at the top, was the cross-cutting later too, the sex scenes as well? Was that intended
Yeah.
to be cross-cut as well?
Yes, that was
Yeah,
always, we went, it was always intercut on the page, but we went further,
yeah.
really jumbling it all up in the way that you always do with that kind of stuff. But yes, that was always supposed, be braided, the three of them braided together. Yeah.
Right. And I think so doing that early in the episode really sets that up beautifully and introduces this
Yeah.
dynamic of the sisters and
Right.
everything they have to overcome. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's so
I
much to
mean,
unpack between them. So
there is a lot. Yes. They have history
um,
and
yeah.
issues.
One thing I'm just curious about in the edit room. So there's this shot that seems employed in a few, maybe every episode. I'm not sure. I didn't go through every episode to see if it was in there, but where the actor's speaking directly to the
Oh,
camera,
yeah.
specifically when Kiki's kind of
Hmm.
seducing or putting on her spell or luring
Yeah,
him
yeah.
in or whatever it may be, really kind of getting into it. Um, what was it like working with those? I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, oh, just cutting from one shot to the other. It seems like it might be quite difficult to go from your typical coverage, your over
Yeah.
the shoulder, your three-quarter, your purple, in and out of those shots. And I was always struck by how seamlessly it came across in the cut. So what was it like working with those shots and
Yeah, I
that
mean, they
process?
were really, really exciting. Actually, the day I got the dailies of that, in the pilot, that really tight, straight
Yeah.
to camera of Julianne Moore just like staring at me, I was so excited. I
Dream.
was so
Yeah.
excited. I was like, I really, I was talking with Lily about it. I'm like, like, I love a director who makes a really bold choice. There was no other coverage. She didn't shoot any other
Oh,
coverage. It's only that,
wow.
like, and nothing. This was it. We were doing it.
Okay.
Um, and I was so thrilled by it. And but the hardest part was, yeah, getting into it, because also there's this strange cut from, in like, it's a continuous conversation of them walking down the stairs, and she
Hmm.
says, what would I do without you? You'd get a new assistant. No,
Hmm.
I wouldn't. I couldn't, and in between, no, we I wouldn't, we're cutting from them at the foot of the stairs to them on the beach at the bottom of the beach stairs. So it's this huge leap
Yeah.
down, but the sentence continues. So that was the trickiest part, was figuring out, like, how can we do this without it being too jarring and having it be, I mean, is very intentionally sort of strange
Hmm.
um and disorienting. Um but so I pre-lapped the dialogue from Michaela from the beach a
Hmm.
little bit, just a few words, so that the audio didn't cut quite as hard. I
Hmm.
sort of put a wave crash that carries us over the cut. I did a lot of sound design stuff to help it. But ultimately, I just think those shots are so beautiful
Hmm.
that you just are like, whoa, now and sucked in. And she really wanted, what Nikki was thinking about was this idea of like what is it like to be looked at by
Hmm.
someone like Michaela,
Hmm.
um to be looked directly at, and to be we called it sirening. We used it sort of as a verb, that she's sort of sirening um Simone there. And you cut the reverse on Simone is, she smiles in this way where you can tell it's like it feels really good to be truly looked at by this woman and sort of, put under her spell. And then the end of that shot, they run. It's Simone's close up that they turn and run off. They jog off,
Hmm.
and the shot goes out of focus. And then we dissolve to an out of focus shot of Devon on the dock. And all of this was in camera, all of it designed, no other
Wow.
choices. Like, it
Wow.
was so well planned, and which is just rare these days, that a
Yeah.
director has such a strong voice. So it was truly exhilarating to get that footage. I mean it. I was like so
Yeah.
excited. And then to see it repeated throughout other episodes. Obviously, Nikki did it again in episode 2, that amazing scene that Laura cut so perfectly in when they're in bed together. And then we go to those
Oh,
side shots, they did this crazy trick with mirrors to shoot that stuff so the actors could still see each other even though the camera was there. It was, I don't, you can, there's a American cinematographer did a little article about it that you can read. But um
yeah.
yeah, and then the other directors adopted it as well, because was a very, very clear point of view, and a style that just carried over the whole series. And yeah, we all loved it and loved being able to, cut to that. You never get to cut
Yeah.
to that,
I mean, it's
straight at the
hypnotic.
camera. Yeah, it
It's
was really great.
just really hypnotic. I absolutely loved it. I
Yeah.
also noticed too, I think in the some of the closer shots of the sisters when they're talking to each other, it's like almost the
Mm,
siren shot, but the eye line is
yes.
slightly off, which again was something I didn't really notice until second viewing. And I said, ah, is I feel the kind of the symbolism of
Mhm.
they're almost there. They're almost connecting. They have this backstory. They have this bond.
Yeah.
Um, but neither of
Yeah.
them quite has a spell on each other that Kiki holds over Simone and will, kind of evolve over the show.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really thoughtful. It's nice to hear you
well,
put it that way.
but it's beautiful, and I think that you guys, yeah, I think the whole team just really did such an incredible job, like sculpting these episodes and helping us go on this journey with these characters in a really fun way. Um,
Yay, thank you.
well, thank you. Thank you for giving us the gift of this show. And I highly recommend watching it in one or two sittings. That's the way I did it. It was very
Yes, I
fun. Have a
think a
glass
lot of
of
people
wine,
did. I think a lot of people have watched it pretty quickly. It's an easy binge, that's for sure.
munching on
Yeah.
an edible arrangement, perhaps. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Ah,
Oh,
it's
this was great.
fun. Well,
Yay.
and I understand that Emmy voting is opening up tomorrow.
It is.
So for any of our viewers who might be, eligible for voting, I think you should please consider voting for Sirens for outstanding picture editing for a limited series. It's going to be,
Hope
I'm
so.
rooting for Sirens, absolutely. So well
Oh, thank
deserved.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, we just had the best time doing it. It truly was like one of those jobs where I was like, could this just never end? Can I just do work with you people forever?
And you feel
I mean,
that.
my commute
You,
was even short. It was like a 15-minute commute. Like I had no complaints about this job at all. It was brilliant. It really was. And
yeah.
I'm really proud of the work that the whole team did. We had such a great time. So
You feel that in the show. You feel the love, like you feel the thought, and I can just tell it was a blast in that cutting room. It sounds like a really fun. I wish I should have come and had lunch with you guys
you
someday.
should
You
have.
guys
It
had
was
the
right near
dream
your
team.
house.
I know you
Yeah.
had the absolute dream team, and
Yeah.
it all translates really well. The show is just so fun. So if anyone hasn't watched it yet, watch it immediately.
Yes,
Um,
please.
yeah,
It's on Netflix. You can find it.
yeah,
All right.
heard of it.
Thank you so much, Jen. This was really wonderful.
Thank
Your
you.
your
It's
your
very
questions are
wonderful.
so thoughtful. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, your work is incredible as always. So thank you. All
Okay.
right.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, let's see if we can figure out how to get off of this
I
thing.
know.
It took us so
I'm gonna
long to
hit
get
the
on it.
X. We'll see. All right.
Okay. Right.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone. Thanks for tuning in.